Welcome to Detroit. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass. You can drown them. And that's what we gotta be. That's who we have to be. Because that's our domain. That is our domain. Because we'll tread water as long as it takes to fucking bury you.
Takes the snap, turns, gives to Montgomery, right side, end zone, touchdown, Detroit Lions! Yes.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions friends, fans, and family members. Welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike. And as always, we're diving on in. So, folks, we know where the Detroit Lions are in terms of relation to the rest of the NFC. We know where they are in relation to the rest of the NFC North Division. We know where they are in terms of relation to the rest of the NFL. The Lions are currently 7-5. The Lions right now are a team that is just on the outside, looking in, trying to get into the playoff picture. They are a team that is still fighting for the playoffs. They're a team that is still trying to prove that they can make the playoffs and that they can still compete and contend with other teams. That is exactly where the Lions are. There's no two ways around it. There's no point in arguing it. It's the reality. It's the truth of the matter. Now, that is the reality where it is at the current moment. However, how one interprets that reality, how one interprets what the Lions are doing, how one interprets how the Lions are going to get to the end of this season based upon that reality, that has got a massive breadth and scope depending upon who you talk to. Let's just call it for what it is. There are some Lions fans out there that think that, hey, you know what? The Lions are okay. They're not good, but so long as they continue to hold fast and hold true to themselves, they'll be fine. They'll get through this year. They'll learn from their mistakes, and then they'll be better for it next year. Then there are other Lions fans that are like, listen, we may or may not make the playoffs. Don't know. And for some people within this category, they don't really care. All they care about is just getting to the end of the season, getting to the off season, and then going on an absolute frenzy to completely, how should I say this? I wouldn't say destroy what happened this year, but to completely revamp, rework, and get all of the bad stuff out to rebuild the team the way it should be. By saying, hey, what we know is that what happened this year did not work. It cannot work moving forward. We have to make changes. And then taking everything that everyone's suggesting for this offseason that's coming up, put it into action, and then get ready for 2026. And then there are some people that are even further despondent or further just don't care. And they're like, listen, I'm done. I don't care one way or the other what the Lions do. They are never going to get it right. They're never going to figure it out. They might be successful, but they're never going to do what they need to do in order to get to the Super Bowl. They're never going to do the right thing by the fans, by the team itself, to actually get all the pieces put together to actually get to a Super Bowl. So for them, they just don't give a turkey one way or the other. They don't give a turkey what Brad Holmes does. They don't give a turkey what, Dan Campbell does. They don't give a damn what the team does. They don't care what happens over the last month and, week that we have of the season. And they don't care what happens in the playoffs. They don't care what happens in the offseason. They don't care what happens moving forward because they are so... how should I say this, negative, for lack of a better word, or lack of a better phrase, or way to put it, that nothing that the Lions do in their eyes is going to alter them from their current course. The way they look at it is a very, very simple one. We are simply tired of looking at the situation for what it is, and we just don't care what the Lions do anymore. We're fed up. We're tired of trying to buy into this whole nonsense. We already thought that, Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes were going to get things right by now, and we already thought that after 5 years we'd have won a Super Bowl, maybe even 2, and the fact that we've come close but haven't gotten there, there's no more reason to invest our time or our interest in this matter. And that's roughly one of the 3 camps that most people are in. But let's just call it for what it is. And some people might move or intermingle with one of those 3 groups, maybe one of all 3 groups at some point or another. But that's where most Lions fans are. Let's just be honest with ourselves. But if there's one thing I'm constantly going to continue to try to get some folks to understand here is that while the fans themselves are constantly moving and constantly trying to figure out where they are within one of those 3 groups as they, go through the rest of the season, and some are already eyeballing the offseason and some have already completely written off the Lions to begin with, the Lions themselves, the players, the coaches, the front office, management, everybody that's inside of the building, they don't care what the outside opinion of them is. They don't care what the naysayers or the doubters are thinking or saying about them because they know who they are and they know what they're trying to do. Now, let me just call it for what it is. Just because they know who they are and they know what they're trying to do, that doesn't necessarily mean that, number one, it's actually going to, reflect itself in these last 5 games. It also does not mean that we should just take a look at that and just say, hey, you know what, the Lions are, the Lions just clearly are understanding of themselves better than anybody else. I would like to think that in 95% of all cases, but I will say this. In a case such as this, sometimes having an outsider perspective who isn't constantly around it every day, that might actually be a good thing to have to simply say, okay, you know what? The inside viewpoint from the team, they're going to obviously think the way they're going to think, and that's fine. But having the ability to have somebody else take a look at the situation and say, okay, what is a untainted, unbiased viewpoint outside of the building in that regard to get a complete full picture of what we're potentially missing here? And again, this whole process is a very, very complex conglomeration of all these opinions. But again, like I've been saying here, the Lions themselves just don't care. And it's kind of funny where the Lions are right now, and that's kind of where the whole point of this episode is right now, is that it almost feels like, and y'all might correct me if I'm wrong, you might agree with me, you might disagree with me, you might not care one way or the other. And that's just, like I said, that's where most Lions fans find themselves, is in one of those 3 camps. It almost feels like the Lions are right back to where they were in 2022, just before they completely flipped the script and went on the last part of their season to finish it out 8-2, finish out with a winning record, and then move into the offseason with their heads held high. And I started thinking about that, and I'm like, you know what? That's actually a really interesting thought process. And my thought process is a very simple, but I think a very profound one, if I'm being honest. The Detroit Lions, quite simply at this point, are getting bombarded on all sides. The local media has got a lot of people that are simply saying, listen, write off the team, put a fork in the season. There's nothing the Lions are going to really be able to do. We're looking at the situation. We don't think the Lions can cut the mustard. We don't think they can make the playoffs. We don't think they're going to be able to do anything. Even if they do make it to the playoffs, the season's dead. It's done. It's over with. Let's just start getting ready for the offseason. Let's start getting ready for draft strategies. Let's start getting ready for potential coaching replacements. Let's start getting ready to actually, do some work to get things back on the right track. But the way I look at it for the Lions is that they already know what the local media is saying about them. They already know what the national media is saying about them. They know what everybody's saying about them. But they have a mindset of just pure, absolute resilience. And they're like, listen, we're not going to revert to this kind of thought process. We're not going to revert to this type of thinking. What we're going to revert to is what we've always done in this situation. But it's a situation that the Lions themselves have not been in since 2022, because in 2023 they went 12-5. They had proven that, they were making the progress. They had made the moves to move themselves in the right direction. And then 2024 came along and it was like, listen, all the things that are happening inside the building, the injuries, not having certain people inside the lineup, the Lions were like, listen, we're winning, we're going 15-2, we believe in ourselves and we believe in what we're doing, and nobody else could really say anything because it was like, hey, they're winning, the numbers prove that they're a good team. Until otherwise, this is who they are. Well, we've now gotten to the otherwise moment, and it's like now all the questioning and all the doubts coming in. So what the Lions are going to have to do, and what I think they're doing right now, is they're reverting to the old dog mindset that they had. And I'm not talking about old dog mindset in just the sense of, hey, you know what? This is something that has happened before about 2.5, 3 years ago. It's an old dog mindset, and like, listen, we've been counted out before. We've been doubted before. We have been told we're no good. We're a bunch of trash. We're just not a good team. And the way I look at it is that the Lions are looking at what everything is being said about them and the whole narrative and viewpoint of them outside the building, and they're like, listen, you guys were once against us before. You guys once told us we were nothing before. And you know what? We proved you wrong. And all we have to do is continue to remain true to ourselves, continue to pull together, continue to do the job, continue to put in the work, and eventually things will turn around. And then once those things turn around, everybody that wants to call us for what we are right now, saying that, we're an incomplete team, we're not good, we're not going to make the playoffs. If we do make the playoffs, we're not going to go anywhere. And even if all that does happen or doesn't happen, some people have just completely written us off and they just don't give a turkey anymore. They're like, that's fine. We're going to continue to do what we need to do. We're going to continue to put the work in, and we're going to continue to actually do our jobs. And it's that mindset that I believe is, again, I know there's been a lot of things said about Dan Campbell in the last couple of, days or weeks. I've said some of those things. But most of where I have said certain things of negativity about Dan Campbell has been about him as a play caller, as a play manager, as a game manager. But the one thing I have never ever said about Dan Campbell that has ever been negative is his ability to understand this team and to get them to rally and to get them to focus upon the things that truly matter and to truly get them into a mindset to actually, push them to move forward and to push them to do better than what other people think they can or cannot do. Because think about it. You go back to that point where we were at in 2022, we're 1-6. The Lions are not winning games. The only game they had won, they had beaten the Commanders, and every other game, before that game or had happened up until that game, before we got into the Packers game, one of two things was true. The Lions were either losing close or they just weren't coming anywhere close to winning. So you're either losing games by a couple points or you're getting your asses handed to you, but you're still losing. That was in essence, irrevocable kind of truth of the matter. It's like you're still losing. Whether you're losing by close or you're losing by a lot, it doesn't matter. You're still losing. And the Lions didn't care. Dan Campbell kept putting out the same message, and the players, they echoed it, and they kept showing up to work, and they kept doing their job. We're this close. We're this close. We're eventually going to turn it around. We just have to keep working. We just have to keep doing our jobs. And eventually it will turn around. And that's what happened. The Packers game comes along. We beat the Packers. And then, hey, you know what? We took that game. We built upon it. We then won the next game. And then we won the game after that. And then by the time it was all said and done, the Lions had gone from being 1-6 to start 2022 to finishing that year 9-8. And over the last couple of, weeks, they were in the thick of it to make it to the playoffs. The game that obviously we know was the one that screwed us out of getting into the playoffs was the Panthers game. That was the game that ultimately screwed us out of getting into the playoffs because we lost that game 37-23. And the thing of the matter is that for a lot of people, that game was a game the Lions could have won, should have won, and they didn't win. But they still kept getting better despite everything that had been said about them, despite everything that, people wanted to say they weren't or who they were, and they just didn't care. And what I think is that mindset, that viewpoint that they had in 2022 is the viewpoint that they're trying to, work with. And that is the mindset that they are instilling right now, is that, listen, forget what everybody else outside the building is saying about us. Forget what the media is saying about us. Forget what some of the fans are saying about us. Forget all that. It doesn't matter. What matters is, are we showing up to work? And not just are we showing up to work to collect a paycheck, but are we showing up to work to get better? Are we showing up to work to continually win? Are we showing up to work to continue to hone our craft and to continue to play with pride? Or are we just giving up like everybody's saying that we're doing? And that's the thing that Dan Campbell has always been able to do with this team is that, listen, don't care what everybody else says outside the building. I know who you are. You know who you are. You know what we need to do to get better. I know what you need to do to get better. So let's do that. Let's get better. Let's play our game. Let's play our style of football, regardless of whatever flaws it might have, regardless of whatever we may or may not have to work with, and let's go win. Now, obviously, a lot easier said than done. I can, talk into a camera and say, hey, you know what, this is what they're going to do. But let's just call it for what it is. Not just the NFL, but this world is a result-based world. It's like, listen, jacking your jaw and flapping your gums, that don't mean nothing to me. What matters is to me is hard-based reality. That is based upon facts. That is based upon results. So talk all you want. You're entitled to talk. It's free speech. It's a free country. But you want to know what actually makes the difference in this world? Results. So the Lions fans that I would say are in the first two categories are like, listen, we still believe, we still want to believe, but what we need is results. What we need is for you to actually start showing us what we are wanting to believe and what you're telling us. And that's why I'm saying I believe that that's what the Lions are going to. That's what they're reverting to for the remainder of the season to finish this season, is to go back to that old dog mindset of saying, hey, you know what? Screw what everybody else wants to think about us. Screw what everybody else wants to think about us and whatever else. We know who we are. We know what we need to do to get better. And you know what? We know the adversity we're going to be facing. We're still going to show up. We're still going to do our job. And what's truly going to make it interesting, what's truly going to make it, I would say, fun in some cases for the Lions coaches and players is the ability to step out on the field and say, hey, you know what? Y'all wanted to doubt us. Y'all wanted to say we couldn't do it. But then we went out and we did it. Now, understand what that means. Just because the Lions go out and, you know what, let's say they win 4 out of their last 5 games. Let's say they run the table and they win all 5 games. Or let's say they win 3 games and they still manage to sneak into the playoffs. That is going to be great. But all that's going to do is simply say, hey, you were able to find a way to get into the playoffs, and that's fine. But it doesn't change anything as far as how we need to get better as far as when the offseason comes around. That part still remains irrevocably stuck in place. That part is not changing no matter what the hell happens. You need to get a better offensive line. You need to get more pass rush help. You need to get a better coach as far as understanding the offense. Either John Morton needs to drastically grow or he needs to be replaced and you need to find a better offensive play caller. Because John Morton, you know what? Even though he did better than Dan Campbell before he was replaced, some people don't think he's the guy. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. Can't say. But I know Dan Campbell's not the guy that needs to be calling the plays long term either. So it's like you either go back to John Morton if you think he's learned, or you decide to say, hey, we're going to part amicably and we're going to try and find somebody else. These are all things that are not going to change no matter what the Lions do, whether they finish the year, 12-5, 11-6, 10-7, 9-8, or worse. Those are all still going to be in place. The only thing that's going to change is, based upon the record, how people are going to interpret it and how people are going to talk about it. That's the only thing that's going to change. The rest of it is all stuck there. But if the Lions can actually revert to that old dog mindset that what I'm talking about, it's going to significantly, smooth and ruffle out the feathers that have been, ruffled up. And it's going to give people actually a viewpoint of saying, okay, over the last month of the season, when things were looking their bleakest, the Lions were able to find a way to win, and they were actually able to pull it off and, get into the playoffs and maybe make some noise before the end of the season. Or they just continue to fade into oblivion, and now here we are in the offseason. Everybody's just looking at them with complete, absolute negativity and, despondency. That's really where it's going to come down to. And I believe if there's one thing I can count on with Dan Campbell and this team is that they have always been good at finding a way to prove the doubters wrong and getting the job done. So, we'll see what happens. Obviously, it all starts Thursday night against the Dallas Cowboys. That's not going to change. But anyway, folks, I just wanted to talk about this, so I've come to the end of the episode, and I'm going to say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to watch the next episode. I also encourage you all to do one of these 3 things, like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you not yet had a chance to do so, want to encourage you all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon so you guys never miss any more content I push out. Hope y'all are doing well. Hope y'all got some in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. God bless, my friends. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.